I'm going to introduce our next topic and presenter. Michael Mullins will be discussing tapping into veterans to fill in-demand roles at companies. Finding talent is a current challenge and top priority for employers, and hiring military veterans has proven to be a successful strategy in this area. In addition to gaining high-performing employees with low turnover, companies generally earn goodwill from their customers and a public image boost when they commit to hiring more military veterans. Our presenter, Michael Mullins, is the director of the North Carolina Defense Industry Diversification Initiative at NC State's Industry Expansion Solutions. Michael is a former Marine and retired Army Lieutenant Colonel. Michael has a comprehensive understanding of the processes and procedures North Carolina businesses face in the acquisition and execution of U.S. government contracts. With that, I would like to introduce you to Michael Mullins.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it. And thanks everyone for participating and attending today's event. Like I said, I'm Michael Mullins. I'm directing the Defense Industry Initiative at IES. And if we go to the next slide, please. This is the agenda. I'm going to talk a little bit about benefits of hiring veterans, some of the workforce basics, some of the impediments from the military or from the veteran side, and then also from the company side. And then what you may be most interested in are some of the veteran transition programs that may be able to assist you to identify and acquire former service members. And then something I think is very important is developing at least a basic understanding of what military occupational specialties are, or MOSs. Next slide. Just some numbers to throw at you. Benefits of hiring veterans. About 2/3 of veterans have some education. A lot of even enlisted individuals in the military have an associate's or a bachelor's degree. Force officers all have a college degree, in many cases a master's, or even in a few cases, especially professors at academies, have PhDs. Employers report that veterans perform better than civilian peers. And one of the reasons so many companies that I work with, mostly defense contractors in North Carolina, express a desire to hire veterans is because of the soft skills. Many times they'll say, I can teach them the hard skills that we need, but it's the soft skills that it's so difficult to find. And that is the teamwork, the problem solving. High at the list is the mission-oriented or goal-oriented approach to work, and even understanding health and safety, because people who served in the military understand the importance of safety in the military and any operations, and have been through all the safety briefings and training that's required, et cetera. So they bring that culture to the company as well. But it's these soft skills, I think, that make many veterans very attractive to not just manufacturers, but service providers and just pretty much any company. Next slide, please. Also very attractive about veterans is the training. Again, I mentioned the civilian education, but individuals who join the service, especially in the Navy and the Air Force, but even the Marines and the Army, can go through some very highly technical training. Just take a missile maintenance technician for the United States Army will spend well over a year in school before he even starts working. Aircraft repairmen, engineers, all these individuals are available in North Carolina at Fort Bragg and at Camp Lejeune and Cherry Point, New River, Seymour Johnson, and the National Guard and Reserve facilities. And that's quite attractive to be able to bring people in that have such extensive experience in the hard skills, but at the same time, bring those soft skills that are so attractive to you. And then they work well independently. I can tell you as a retired military that veterans do not do well with being micromanaged. It's something that you may want to keep in consideration when you're working with people. But and the last is a tax credit. And certainly this isn't the motivating factor to hire a veteran. It's just kind of a benefit that may exist. And I'm not a CPA, but you may want to take a look at this. The rules are changing all the time, and see if there's a tax credit for your company to bring on any veterans. Next slide, please. All right, some more numbers. We have about 19 million veterans, according to the VA in the United States. That's it's about less than 10% of the total U.S. population. About 667,000 veterans are in North Carolina. Look, North Carolina has the third largest active duty footprint in the nation, the military. California, Texas, North Carolina. We have the largest military installation in the United States, called Fort Bragg, or center of gravity, as they would call it. And the only place that has more generals than Bragg is a place called the Pentagon. We have the largest expeditionary force on the planet, called Camp Lejeune. And we have an enormous amount of reserve and guard facilities throughout the state of North Carolina. One of the things that should be made aware of, veterans tend to be on the older end of the spectrum. And the reason is because we used to have conscription military. Think about the Korean War and the Vietnam War, and we had individuals that served, a one-year tour in Vietnam, We had a lot of individuals go through the military during that period. So if you look at 45% of veterans are 65 or older, compared to just 20% of non-veterans, and then 9% of the veterans between the ages of 18 and 34, less than 1/3 of the share of non-veterans. So just some numbers you need to be made aware of. Next slide, please. All right, I mentioned some of those annual transitions, approximately 16,000 individuals, whether they serve 4 years in the Army or the Marine Corps in North Carolina, or they serve 24, about 16,000 transition out of the service each year in North Carolina. And again, they have that combination of those hard and soft skills. And I think clearly the desire by employers, at least the companies I work with, is real. The DoD commitment to helping these individuals transition from military service into the civilian sector is real, and you can see it now. That doesn't mean that there is an improvement still to be made. There is. And I went through the Transition Assistance Program, or the TAP, many years ago. It, I would say, left a little bit to be desired. It's clearly improved, and one of the more popular programs now that I'll speak about in a moment is the DoD Skill Bridge program that if you're a company looking for veterans, you certainly need to take a look at. And then, of course, there's a ton of these civilian programs that exist out there. NC Works, NC for Me in North Carolina for military employment. Some of these are government programs, some of these are private, nonprofit, et cetera. I would just suggest that there's so many of them, is take your time, do your due diligence, and just like you would if you were, looking for a charity, look at where their money goes and success rate, and just do a little research about them and make sure it's an organization that you want to spend your time working with. So why is there an issue with 16,000 veterans in North Carolina getting out? They're all there. What's the problem? Next slide. All right. Well, first of all, those 16,000 individuals in North Carolina, there's a filter, and that filter screens out a lot of them just from the fact that maybe they want to go back to Arkansas and work with their dad. They joined the Army for the GI Bill, and now they're going, to the University of Alabama for the next 6 years and get a degree. Or maybe if they're retiring, they may want to get a federal job. It's quite common. Maybe they want to go out and with occupational versus avocational. And then, of course, you need to keep in mind, very important, is that there's 49 other states vying for these North Carolina veterans. And there's so much now online that, especially these, in the technology age that we live in, that somebody at Fort Bragg can easily reach out to other military installations and programs that exist there and see jobs that are being offered in Texas or Washington State, wherever the case may be. And also, many of these organizations that run these transition programs have programs run throughout the United States at other military installations, and they allow access for jobs also for these veterans to look at. So maybe they can find a job in Ohio that would be more suitable for them, and then building North Carolina. So there's a lot of companies vying for these individuals. So I think if you want to be successful in hiring veterans, I think proactive is the way to go. It really is. They're not going to show up on your doorstep. So we'll talk about some of the ways to do that. Next slide, please. All right, some of the impediments I've already talked about. I won't spend much time on this slide. Unrealistic skills perception, job expectations. One of the things I've seen, and I've worked with a lot of individuals who are especially retired from the military, is an expectation, because you were a senior NCO or a senior officer, that you're just going to walk into a kind of a higher level position. And I've explained to them in many cases that's just not the way it works. I mean, you really do have to kind of prove yourself again. You'll have the opportunity, if you're that good, I suppose, to move back up quickly. But in many cases, you have to kind of prove yourself again in a position that maybe you think is not suitable, we'll say, for you. But that's something you may encounter when you deal with, especially more senior level former military personnel. Next slide, please. This is a problem from the company side, not understanding the MOSs. And I'll talk about that in a moment, and misunderstanding disabilities. Just because a veteran has PTSD or has some physical limitations, that doesn't mean that they can't be a great candidate or suitable for your company. So you need to become more familiar with those disabilities, those individuals, and see what their requirements are, and they could turn out to be a great individual for your company. You need to have a program to recruit veterans, because obviously, if you're marketing to recruit people for your company, your marketing strategy will not be the same for veterans, very likely, than it would be for anyone else. And you also need to be selling a career. Military people, former military people, are looking largely for a career, not just a job. They want to get in, they want to move up, they want to have a future in your company. They're not just there to fill a short-term job. And that's typical. And then the lack of understanding of military compensation. I would encourage your HR person to take a look at military compensation rates. It's all online. Public salaries are public knowledge to the military, and have an understanding of people that you're interviewing, because people in the military get paid more than a base pay. They get paid housing allowances. They get paid all sorts of special pays. They have what they call cost of living allowances because they're living in Europe or Asia, wherever. So their base pay may be $30,000, but they may be actually bringing in $50,000 a year. And I will tell you, a young soldier, all he knows is all of it's going to the Fort Bragg Credit Union, and he sees that that's what he gets. So he doesn't really see that distinction a lot of times. Really, maybe he just doesn't want to. But you just need to be aware of what the compensation is. I mean, somebody who's a major, for example, that's an officer who maybe has 15 years in the Army, and he has a housing allowance and a family, is probably making six figures. And I think a lot of people in the civilian sector are not really fully aware of the salaries the military makes. I just think you need to pay a little attention to it when you're dealing with veterans and doing interviews for potential jobs. Veterans transition programs. I'm not going to go through all these. You'll get these slides, but the first one I do want you to take a look at is the Skill Bridge. This is a program that I work with several companies that participate in, but you as a company can join into the Skill Bridge program and essentially post your positions for your company in this program. And what does that mean is that veterans throughout the entire, not just the United States, but even overseas, can see these positions. And if they have an interest in the job, in this case, it's really more of an internship, is they can 6 months before they're, they leave the military, retire, or just transition out of it, they can actually come to your company. They're still paid by the military. They still receive their benefits. They're still active duty, but they're working at your company, and they're hanging up their uniform. And this is an opportunity for them. Now, they selected your company based on the type of company and interest they obviously have in the position, to see if this is something they may want to continue to do once they're out of the military. And you as an employer can, evaluate the employee and see if this is an individual you would like to retain when the end of their time in the military is up. You can do it up to 6 months out. Normally, it's somewhere around the 3 or 4 month range. You're able to get them. It does require their command chain of approval, or chain of command approval. So it's maybe a little bureaucratic for you, but I know a number of companies that successfully use active duty soldiers working at their companies, and then ultimately have hired them as well. So I would suggest you take a look at that. All the other transition programs there, Army, Marine Corps, Navy, take a look at it. It'll also link you to the Fort Bragg, Camp Lejeune, and those programs. I know that it's a lot to ask, especially I'm talking to small companies, to leave your office out in Western North Carolina, let's say, and go spend the day at Fort Bragg or Camp Lejeune. But many companies do exactly that, because you're doing face-to-face conversations with hundreds of individuals going through there that are about to leave the military. They're giving you resumes. You're having a discussion with them about your company, and it's a real opportunity to sell your company in that position to these individuals. If you don't have the time to do that, there are other programs. Next slide, please. And I'll get to one that I'm really, the North Carolina for Military Employment, North Carolina Works Veterans, and Community College Customized Training Programs. These are all other programs within the state of North Carolina. I would tell you, take a look at the North Carolina for Military Employment, or the NC4ME. Great program. I know the person who runs that. And they do a lot of career fairs around the state and run a lot of veteran transition programs with employers as well. Next slide, please. If you don't have the time to get out, then I would suggest, if you're a manufacturer, you may want to take a look at this first program. It's called Heroes Make America. I've had several companies that I work with participate in events with active duty veterans, even spouses that participate in what else called the HMA program. There are 5 programs established around the United States. It's run by the Manufacturing Institute at Fort Hood, Texas, Fort Campbell, Kentucky, Fort Riley, Kansas, Fort Benning, Georgia, and Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And these individuals, they're also a part of the Skill Bridge program, but up to 6 months out, they're going through the HMA program, getting certifications that are needed in manufacturing, and interviewing with companies that come in person or do these kind of company marketing presentations and listing of positions available remotely. Done it several times with companies, and I've worked with companies that have hired individuals out of the HMA program at Fort Bragg. What's really nice about it as well is, and I can send all this information to you, is you can access the current list of all students or service members who are going through the program at all 5 of those locations, and you can see all their certifications, their rank, their MOS, their resume, their contact information, et cetera. So not only do you have access to reach out and contact individuals at Fort Bragg, but you can contact them at Fort Hood and Fort Benning and Fort Riley, Kansas. Of course, if you're in Kansas, you'd much rather come to North Carolina. But it's a really great system, and I've had several companies hire individuals out of HMA. So I'd be more than happy to share that information with you as well. Next slide. And talking about developing a better understanding of military occupational specialties. I would suggest, again, your HR person take a look at, and I'm going to give you some resources in a moment here, but you don't have to be that knowledgeable, but become a basic fundamental understanding of MOSs in the military. Because you can take those MOSs actually, and let's say, you're an aircraft maintenance company or a transportation company of some sort. You can identify those MOSs that are in the military, whether it be the Marine Corps, the Army, the other services. And you can, and I've done this myself. I was a program manager with other companies and I hired veterans, and I would put MOSs in the job requisitions and in the titles. So maybe I'm looking for somebody who was a former military maintenance warrant officer. An individual maybe has 30 years of maintenance experience at a variety of levels throughout the service and around the world. So this person knows that you're looking specifically for somebody with their MOS, and that you're also cognizant and interested in talking to military veterans about this position. So the way to do that, if you go through the next slide, please, and let's just go to the last slide, one more. Okay, these are the resources. If you go to the U.S. Department of Labor, has information on this, the ACE Military Guide and the Military Skills Translator. Again, get your HR person to take a look at this, become familiar with. And I think that if you are really serious about looking for veterans, then you can become more knowledgeable about the MOSs that are most suitable for the positions that you need filled in your company, and then include that in your job postings, and especially when you post those jobs at Fort Bragg and at Camp Lejeune and at other of these military installations, and you can do exactly that. So if you reach out to Bill McMillan, who leads all the transition assistance programs, for example, at Fort Bragg, then they can get you familiar with how that process works, and you can post your company's positions down at Fort Bragg. And when individuals are coming into the transition assistance program offices, they can see all of your positions available, and then reach out to you and have a discussion about employment. So covered a lot in a short amount of time, but before I close out, let me just say that more than willing to have a much longer discussion with anyone here that's on the call. Just reach out to me if you want to do a Zoom call, you want to do a phone call. I'm more than happy to, I could probably link you up with some companies that have used the SkillBridge program. So maybe you could speak with their CEO and see how the program worked for them and exactly how it worked at Fort Bragg and any other military installation in the state they've used. So don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to have a longer discussion with you about these resources. And that's all I have. Thanks again.